Morning, everyone. Welcome back. It is June the 3rd. We are continuing where we left off in our look at Unit 6. I know that this is every day I've been posting a video, and it may be a lot for you to take in at once. The reason I'm doing this is that I can give you all of next week to work on stuff. Because remember, June the 12th is the last day I'm taking any sort of assignments in. I just want to give you as much time as I can, where you're not having to watch videos, but where you're just working on whatever it is that you still have to do. I guess I never mentioned this, but I'll mention it now. There won't be a final exam for you all, just for the sake of time. It just won't work. So if you were worried about that, no need to worry anymore. And yeah, so we're just going to finish off this unit probably by the end of this week, and then all of next week you'll just work on this booklet or booklets from past units just to get caught up and be satisfied with the grade that you have. I do want to say this as a little bit of an encouragement. Your marks in grade 11, they do play a part when you're done high school, especially for those of you that apply for scholarships. There are scholarships that do look at your grade 11 year and your marks, and the better you do in your subjects, the more money you can receive. So there's a little bit of an incentive to do well on things. So that's enough of my little introduction. We're going to continue on. We're on student activity 39. The pursuit of internationalism in addressing contemporary global issues. So basically, we're going to look at the problems of the world today while we are talking about this pursuit towards internationalism. The focused question we're going to look at is, what current issues face internationalism? So one of them is going to be blaringly obvious, if not before, definitely after. We're on page 10 of the booklet or on slide 24 of the presentation. The terms that we're going to be introducing today is climate change, which we should all be aware of, disease, which again we should, poverty, debt, and human rights. So these are the five, well there's more, but these are the big hitters when it comes to current issues facing internationalism. Because remember yesterday when we talked about international law and agreeing to being a part of these international law, adhering to these laws. These sort of things are what cause countries to disagree with each other because they have different views on things like these five terms. So we'll go through them and hopefully you'll have a good understanding. But like I said, we're talking about contemporary issues, so issues that are happening right now. So you'll see how these are impacting our lives right now. So we're going to start with climate change because climate change is a very hot button issue. The thing that we have to remember is that the environment, the world, and nature doesn't pay attention to restrictions or borders or these sort of things. That is why we have to see the world as this interconnected entity. What happens in one country will affect another. So climate change is just that thing. Pollution in the air or in the water in one country can spill over into another. That is why, as an international community, there have been attempts to try and create a better world for us all. So the first one is the Kyoto Protocol, and this was introduced in 1997. It was an international attempt to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There was an agreement that they would reduce the emissions by 20% by 2020. That's this year. Canada has recently announced it will not meet this goal. So Canada has not been able to reduce its emissions by 20%. The cost to the economy is estimated by some at $51 billion to try to get this to work. You can see we haven't done a very good job of that. So recently, we've had a second attempt at this. So many question Canada's commitment to correcting the climate change problem. We are still among the worst polluters. Only the United States and Belgium rank lower than us. So we are not doing a very good job. So in 2015, the international community came back again and signed on to what's known as the Paris Agreement. So it was negotiated by 196 international parties and was adopted by an agreement in December 2015. The agreement is to limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, you're probably thinking that that's really, really insignificant, but over 5 years, we're talking a big change in the climate, and we're talking about plants who could be affected as well. Each country that is part of the agreement will decide how to meet this goal. So it's not that we're all following the same sort of criteria on a sheet of paper saying, here, these are the bullet points you have to do. No, they are all deciding how it best fits them, because as we saw with the Kyoto Accord, some countries could not meet what was outlined. So every country is going at it its own way. Most notably in 2017, when President Donald Trump was elected, he withdrew the United States from the agreement. So when we were talking yesterday about internationalism and how certain countries have to give up certain sovereignty rights when they agree to international agreements, that's interesting. Donald Trump said, no, this is against America's best interest, so they withdrew. So it is very unfortunate to see this because, like we said, the environment doesn't care about international borders. It won't be going polluting. Oh wait, there's a border there, I gotta stop. No, it just keeps going. So it's sad that one of the world's, if not the world's largest economy has decided not to. And it's really funny that places that have been called countries that are a lot more difficult to deal with, places like North Korea, they're still in the Paris Peace Agreement. Interesting stuff. So on slide 28, you can watch this video. I'd strongly encourage you to, leaving the Paris Agreement and the effect it's going to have. Because like I said, the United States is a big economy in the world, so we can't ignore them when they decide to do something, especially being our neighbors too. So another challenge to internationalism. This one, we're kind of experiencing it, so I won't really go too much into it. It is the spread of disease. Disease is not a new problem. The Black Death may have killed up to 125 million people in the 14th century, the Black Plague. The Spanish flu virus killed as many as 50 million people in the 1920s, including 50,000 Canadians. New diseases like SARS are thought to be a similar threat. So the coronavirus, or the COVID-19 as it is now called, is a part of that family of this SARS disease, I guess, the respiratory diseases. So we are living in a pandemic, and we saw that it started in China, in Wuhan, and now it is in every single country. Well, almost every single country. Some countries say they don't have it yet. But you've seen it spread, and we have seen the impact it has. I remember when we were in school, February, I believe, some of you were even asking, we were even talking about it as a thing, as a side note. Now it has taken over the all news outlets. So we have seen that, and now we've also seen the response by the international community. So international efforts to stop the spread of disease. The World Health Organization has probably been the most obvious way. So they identify, monitor, and control health threats. The last major outbreak or pandemic occurred in 1957 and 1968. Well, now it's not. Now it's 2019, 2020. Major pandemics are thought to occur over every 100 years. So the Spanish flu happened about 100 years ago. Now we're living in this one. So hopefully we don't have to see another one. The next one, well, we'll leave that one alone because it says the next one may kill up to 7 million people. Well, we're living in the next one, and I don't think it's going to get to 7 million. The WHO suggests it's a matter of time, but again, this is kind of dated now. So I'll just leave that one alone. I'll skip over slide 31 because it's talking about the avian flu. But we're already living it. One thing that we have been living, and not many people have seen it as a pandemic, more as an epidemic, is that of HIV and AIDS in Africa. AIDS now is a treatable disease. There's drug therapy can slow the virus and increase the chances of survival. 0.3% of Canadians have AIDS. AIDS is more of a significant problem in developing countries where they don't have the drug therapy treatment and they don't have access to that medical knowledge. So in sub-Saharan Africa, 1.6 million people died of AIDS in 2007. 22.5 million are living with the disease. So you can see it is very much impacting the lives of people in the developing world. AIDS, arguably the biggest single concern facing African countries. The international response is required because countries most affected are least able to deal with it. So one way that can happen is with the international community agreeing to relax the rules regarding drug manufacturing, and also having maybe even just sending these sort of goods to these countries to help them provide a better living condition for people. Another challenge to internationalism is poverty. So poverty, we have it all over. Our city is not immune to it. So poverty causes many problems, including hunger, disease, and conflict. When people are hungry, they will do things to, take care of themselves, and that sometimes can be illegal things. So it is the spark that makes many fires. So more than 1 billion people in the world live in absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is the condition characterized by severe deprivation of basic human needs, including food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, healthcare, shelter, education, and information. It depends not only on income but also on access to service. So there is people who are what we would call working poor. They have jobs, they have the ability to work, but because whatever the circumstances are, things are too expensive. They can't afford these sort of things that umbrella into the idea of absolute poverty. Oxfam has identified the following factors that cause poverty. So this organization has outlined these 5 points as being the reason why we see so much poverty in the world: lack of education, lack of access to resources, conflict and war, trade rules, and discrimination. These are all a part of the perfect storm that produces poverty. And it's not just in developing countries, but developing countries are hit the most. It is also in developed countries as well. Like I said, Canada is not immune to it. If you're interested, I can give you the name of a very good book. It was written by, I forget his name, but he actually lives, I think it's a year, as a homeless person in Toronto. And it's basically a diary or journal of his experience on a day-to-day basis. It's very well written. I'll give you the name if you're interested. And you can see that this is talking about Toronto. We're not talking about places that are having conflict or war, like places like Syria right now. No, this is in Toronto, the biggest city in Canada. So another threat to internationalism is debt. Many countries cannot pay their expenses from their national income. So that's where they have to go to other countries or to the IMF or the World Bank to receive loans. So usually the largest single payment is international debt. So a lot of countries are really focused on paying their debts back. Often to qualify for a loan, countries must cut services. So they need to show that they can pay back these loans to either other countries or to the World Bank. So odious debt. This is debt which has been accumulated by a despotic regime to strengthen its rule and not used to help develop the state of it or its people. So these are when leaders take in this money or in this aid, and it's not used appropriately. Sometimes it's just used to fatten their own bank accounts. So many argue such debt should be paid by the regime, not the people, but that's in an ideal world. So Probe International, as an NGO, believes that such debt should not be paid back. Many wealthy countries have forgiven debts, believing this will increase a country's economic stability. If you think about it in simplest terms, that is exactly what would happen. If a country is receiving a loan of whatever amount of money and they put it towards their economy and their industries, and they start to build a good foundation, if they're concerned about paying it back, then they can't use that money to either develop other industries, or, like we talked about this slide before, tackle things like lack of education or lack of access to resources. So then they can't tackle poverty. And if you can't tackle poverty and you're only focused on paying your debts back, essentially you've put that country into a cycle that it can never break out of. So for wealthy countries to forgive debts is extremely it helps these developing countries to break the barrier and to break this cycle and to progress. And then again, they can take part in these international organizations in a different point of view, not as the beneficiary, but as a provider. Because if a country can take that leap from developing to developed, they can look back and they can start to be the ones that help to develop other countries. It's very simple if you think about it, but like we talked about with the oceans, it is very complex when we talk about international law. So those are debts. Human rights. Now, human rights is a very touchy subject because when we talk about international regulations, these are not laws that have been set out. These are suggested actions, I guess you can say. That's why it's so hard to pursue and punish countries who violate human rights. So the Holocaust awoke the international community about international response to human rights violations. 6 million Jews and 7 million other people of different groups were exterminated in the Second World War. When the world saw this for the first time, they were shocked and they were in disbelief. So they saw that, there needs to be a response. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the UN in 1948. So this is about the time when, the Nuremberg trials are almost over and they've tried those people for war crimes. The UN has made a clear mandate to become involved in countries violating the rights of citizens in another country. So what we saw yesterday, we talked about Rwanda. That's an example of the UN trying to get involved, obviously not doing a very good job, but still trying to do something. The UN does not have a mandate when these violations occur within a sovereign country. So it must have full support of the Security Council. The 5 permanent members each have a veto. If they block that, if they say no, then nothing can happen. And that's a very sticky situation because, like I said, there is no agreement on things, and every country has its own beliefs about what violates human rights and what doesn't. For example, in Canada, you can turn on your laptop or you can go on your smartphone and go to Google and search something, anything. In China, you can't do that. So is that a question of human rights violation, the access to the internet? In China, no, but in the rest of the world, they could say yes. Now, here's the thing. China is a part of the Security Council, so they can veto something if they feel it infringes on their sovereign rights or it harms their international reputation. Thus, the problem is not solved. So, the last one we're going to talk about is conflict. A primary goal of the UN is to prevent international conflict. It has done an okay job. Scratch that. It hasn't done a very good job at all. Because after World War II, we have seen wars. Yes, we haven't seen the grand scale war. We saw the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of or the breakup of Yugoslavia. Oh, there's too many to count, but we haven't seen that full-scale war, which some people can credit to the United Nations, because it did take 20 years between World War I and World War II, and it's been almost 100 years since the start of World War II. So we could argue that there is some sort of positives there. Often peace and security issues are complex, and the international community struggles to deal with them. This question, in your opinion, this question at the bottom, is the question that the international community is struggling with. Should the UN interfere with internal matters within a country? Why or why not? Does this violate another country's self-determination? This question is what is argued all the time. We've seen conflicts that the United Nations has not gotten involved in. So, for example, in the Korean War, they got involved. But if you look at the rise of ISIS in the Middle East and the formation of a caliphate that they've called it, the UN didn't send in troops. It was done by a coalition of different peoples: Russia, the United States, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. But the UN didn't send in any sort of force. So these sort of questions come up. And we're going to see, unfortunately, in the future, when more conflicts arise, how the UN will respond. And does it violate another country's self-determination? Some people will say yes, and the United Nations has no authority to enter. Whereas other people will say, well, yes, because like pollution, conflict in one country doesn't just stay there, it spreads, and it spreads quickly. So when, for example, in 2011, when we had the Arab Spring, conflict arose in places like Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and Syria. And it spread. The idea spread, and conflict spread as well. So, to summarize, what current issues face internationalism? Well, we just saw climate change, disease, poverty, debt, and human rights. The reason that these things are so, these are issues for internationalism is because they spread quickly, and peoples are affected by them on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter if you're a developed country or if you're a developing country. These sort of things affect everybody. You can go onto Google right now and type in U.S. debt calculator, and a website will show up, and it will show you the United States debt in live feed as it goes up and up and up and up and up. And so we do have the most developed country in the world has, I think, 2 point something trillion dollars worth of debt, but it's also one of the most prosperous countries that has ever existed. So these are the current issues facing internationalism. I would say, to umbrella all those in, it is individuals and their perspective on those 5 categories that we just talked about. Because what one person thinks should be the answer to those 5, another person will have a completely different point of view. And those 2 things coming together, they don't mesh well sometimes. And then we see the continuing of this conflicts. So that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow with the next, I think the second last lesson. And so keep working on the booklets, keep emailing me your questions, keep emailing me anything that you've missed from anything that we've done, and I'll mark it for you. And also looks like a nice day today, so enjoy it. I think this weekend is supposed to be pretty wet, so enjoy this while you can. Okay, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow.